I've been tracking all my running for many years now. I've got around 10,000 observations of food that I've eaten over the years. I track symptoms like sudden chills, sudden fatigue.
Self-tracking technologies are becoming more and more part of people's everyday lives.
In 2016, I sneezed 280 times. I took photos of the eczema on my hands at least twice daily. I'm wearing these 3 devices most of the time.
It's very, very political for me to not document something.
When I started doing self-tracking, I had a mindset of I wanted to debug myself, as I know from debugging a computer system. I'm Tomas Blomseth Christiansen. I'm 42 years old, I'm from Denmark, and I'm a self-tracker. I started self-tracking in around 2007, 2008. I wanted to do something about my allergies, and I didn't get any good solutions in the medical system. And then I started turning the methods I know from software development onto myself and looking at myself as a system that I could improve. I've always been interested in kind of keeping tracks of phenomena. I tracked a lot of food over the years. I've tracked water intake, the pollen count, sleep, toilet visits, and over the years I've been tracking a host of other phenomena. Original But of course my claim to fame is my sneezes. I have a complete record of my sneezes since May of 2011. For me, sneezing is much more a signal from my body about how things are going. So I'm using this instrument over here, this button, which is that basically I don't even have to look at it. I can conceal it under my sleeve, and then when I feel itching in my nose, I'll just press the button. Self-tracking is also about practicing how you lead your own life and creating a feedback loop in that learning process. I've been looking at my body as a decision-making system, and then I've tried to figure out how can I influence those decisions. For instance, how can I influence my body so it won't decide on launching sneezing during the grass pollen season, for instance.
We're in this wellness and self-help era where people are constantly trying to attain better health, whatever that looks like, and better well-being. Self-tracking technologies allow people to become experts in how their bodies work and function.
I think one of the great benefits of using data to understand ourselves and our bodies is that we can live better together with our bodies. So we can kind of not live in spite of our biology, but with our biology. Today I feel happy. Actually, one of the really interesting things I think happens when you start tracking is that you just start becoming more aware. Like you just pick up more cues yourself in your own computer or your own mind.
I believe that self-tracking has turned me into a better listener to my own body. So I know much more about what is good for me and what I should stay away from. A lot of those issues that I would potentially go to a doctor to discuss, I can just do myself now.
I'd like to argue that wearable devices can give us some really interesting information about.
We've long viewed general practitioners and other types of doctors as the experts in understanding our own bodies. But when a patient has a really good sense of how they are feeling, I think it can really help in getting to a diagnosis more efficiently.
From anxiety disorders here.
When you empower patients, they're better able to make decisions about the treatments that fit their lifestyles as well.
When my allergies were getting worse and I went to my doctor, I didn't experience the kind of problem-solving approach that I believe in. So for me, it wasn't so much a question about who had the most knowledge. For me, it was a question about, did I believe in the method that was applied? And that was when I decided, I believe I have a better method for solving my personal health issues. One major result is that I haven't been using any allergy medication since 2010. And then I realized this fall that I have not seen a doctor since 2008.
These technologies absolutely push people towards taking responsibility for their own health rather than having support and consulting with the doctor. I think there's a drive towards that kind of model of healthcare provision where the individual is more responsible and therefore costs the state less.
The other part of it is that it also has this implicit logic of optimization, that a human being should always think about how could I be better, skinnier, more effective all the time. Even I saw some people, could get discounts on their employee insurance if they were working or walking more.
There's increasing interest in collecting data about people. You have health insurers or you have corporate wellness providers collecting data about people.
In the workplace wellness programs that invite people to self-track, there's often an underlying assumption that if you don't do it, you're not being a responsible, productive worker.
The examples that we're seeing with Fitbit being used in the workplace is that employers give employees Fitbit bracelets, which measures, how many calories they burn in a day, how many steps they take, and they not only wear these in the workplace, but also on their time off. This is an example of what I would call colonization of your life. You don't leave work when you leave work. You bring work home with you, and you bring the demands of having a boss home with you. I don't mind having a boss, but I don't want them in a fitness center with me.
For me, the self-training process is really a learning process. Having this other entity look over your shoulder might hamper the process itself.
With the corporate wellness schemes, there is a real risk that we slip into a surveillance culture where the boundaries between your own private data and how you're evaluated by these insurance companies, how your corporate company evaluates you, depending on these lifestyle parameters. I think that's dangerous territory.
We suddenly start to have these unspoken norms where one type of way of treating your body becomes hierarchized over another, and where some types of bodies are very silently, pushed out into the margins. That logic of optimization and comparing yourself to other people all the time, to me, it leads to a society where we are streamlined and where we all attempt to lead very similar lives and have similar bodies and similar interests. And I think it's a shame.
I think it's really important that people don't feel they have to fit into some average, that we understand each body as a very unique organism. Because when you start looking at data, you can compare yourself with others, which can be good, but you also want to make sure that you don't kind of end up with some ideal that everybody feel that their data should match up to.
I think we need to understand more about how companies think about our data and how that data is going to be used in the future.
There are a lot of uses for self-tracking in society where you really have to think about the ownership of the data and who controls the access to the data. And then I'll be talking about my tracking my running and how I'm working on improving my running even using self-tracking. Yeah.
Of course, some of the risks are that this data, which is private, can be misused.
There are some commercial interests that will benefit from knowing something about you so they can sell you goods or services that you don't quite need, for instance. But of course there are also other areas where it's much more problematic. If you're kind of forced to hand over data that you have collected about yourself that could incriminate yourself, that would be very problematic. When it comes to the bulk of my data and the data that I really regard as private, I have had the privilege of building those tools myself. So I'm in complete control of the data, where it goes, who is able to access, and so on.
Tomas has got technical expertise and knowledge so that he is able to construct his own tools and develop ways for himself of tracking himself.
I'll talk about doing some intense run frames.
But most people aren't like Tomas. They don't have that expertise. They must rely on the proprietary platforms and devices. And the problem with that is that they lose control of their data. Once people have generated their data, they no longer own their own data.
I planned to do 11K in 58 minutes, and I finished in 58 minutes and 5 seconds. One of the things I do to protect the privacy of my data is not to release the raw data. If you share your raw data on the internet, then it's out there and you can never retract it. And you can't know what it might be used for.
It's very, very political for me to not document something and to not publicize it. And I think there is something extremely radical about just being silent, about not publishing something, about not writing something publicly, about not sharing something, about not commenting something. That is something that I'm seeing more and more in my, early millennial generation, that a lot of us are kind of drawing back a little.
Data companies have a big ethical responsibility to honor people's privacy, to do everything we can to keep it safe. I think we're going to have a future where technology is everywhere.
I think that there will be new domains where self-tracking will be introduced that we can't even predict yet.
What I've seen over the years is that some of the practices that seemed very odd and nerdy in the early days of quantified self, they have now become commonplace. And I think that's the kind of trajectory that we'll be seeing with self-tracking, that we'll actually be doing self-tracking on a host of different areas of our lives, but we won't be calling it self-tracking anymore. So I'm perhaps just a bit ahead of the curve.